just press the Let's Go Live button, so let's give the stream a quick second to fire up. If you're not familiar with the program, we do multi-stream all across the internet, places like Facebook and Periscope and Twitch, and YouTube always takes a second to get alive and well, but it looks like things are rocking and rolling, so let's get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a little thing called justice. And it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and I to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. And that's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon our very system with the hope of encouraging some meaningful change. We're very grateful that you are here and with us today. We've got a lot of legal documents to get into. This is going to be sort of a one-track show. Normally, I like to break things up a little bit, but today we just got bombarded with documents, purportedly legal documents. They're impeachment documents. Of course, I'm talking about the Democrats submitting their trial memorandum, their legal brief, which is not very brief. It's like 80 pages long. And they submitted that over to the Senate in preparation for the impeachment trial of the 45th president, as he's calling himself, Donald Trump, which is going to be taking place next week on February 8th or February 9th. I'm not exactly sure yet, but it's coming up. It's coming up soon next week, and we're going to be covering the heck out of it. So the Democrats submitted their memorandum. It's very, very long. It's all encompassing. It's got some good stuff. It's got some not so good stuff, and we're going to go through it. We're going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. And we're going to see a lot of text, a lot of text. So you're going to hear me reading a lot, and I'm going to try to intersperse some thoughtful, witty commentary as we go through. But there's a lot here. Then we have, we're not done yet. Then we're going to be looking at Donald Trump's response, because they filed a 14-page response literally like an hour after the original document was submitted. And their response is responding to some of the main allegations that the Democrats are making. So we've got a lot to get into. We may see a little bit of AOC popping in here to describe, her belief about what happened at the Capitol Hill Riots. So we've got a lot to get to. Before we jump into it, I want to remind you to subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. We go live at this time every single day of the week, except for the weekends. Every weekday we go live. We want you to be a part of that. If you want to get a copy of the slides that I'm about to go through, those will be available for you over on a different platform called Locals. Our web address over there is watchingthewatchers.locals.com, and it has a copy of these slides, has a copy of my book for free if you want to download that. The impeachment party template. The impeachment is coming up soon, so get your documents in order, my friends. And that's available along with existence systems and a lot of other good people, so head on over there if you want a copy of that. Now, as I'm going through this broadcast, like I said, we're going to be looking at the primary source documents, so all of the formal documents that were submitted by the Democrats and by Trump and his legal team. And if you want to submit a question or a super chat or anything like that, feel free to do so as we're going through. At the end of the program, that's when we're going to answer all of those and spend a little bit of time dissecting your thoughts. So let's get started. Let's get right on into the meat and potatoes here. I want to start by doing a quick recap on what the original article of impeachment was. So remember, Donald Trump was impeached officially on January 13th, so about just over 2 weeks ago, as a result of what happened on January 6th. January 6th was the Capitol Hill riot date, and that was not a good day, right? I came on the program and I said, hey, what we saw there was unacceptable, totally, gross behavior, and not anything that we want to endorse or support. And then it sort of morphed into this, incitement of insurrection. And now suddenly Donald Trump was responsible for all of that horror that we saw. And then they started to kind of expand the scope of this thing a little bit to not only be about Donald Trump on that particular day, but also everything that Donald Trump has said basically since the election day back on November 3rd. And then it was not even about only Donald Trump anymore. Now it was about all of his supporters and anybody who is, I would say MAGA world. And then it even expanded further beyond that. And now we're talking about disinformation and dangerous language, and libertarians are extremists, and people are being arrested for memes. And I mean, it's just kind of spiraled out of control. So what I want to do is start back and look at the original documents, okay? The way that this works when you're talking about an impeachment, the House of Representatives is like the prosecutor. They're the ones who will identify the conduct that they think is illegal, that is an impeachable offense, they'll submit their article of impeachment. And this is very similar, in my mind, is sort of analogous to what we see in criminal law, where if somebody commits a crime, they get charged with what's called an indictment. Have you seen that in the movies or in the TV shows? Somebody's formally indicted, and that means that a prosecutor is drafting up a document, and typically, they can be pretty robust, they can be very long, they can be very short, it just depends. But typically what the prosecutor is doing there is it's their opening argument. They're going out there and they're saying, look, judge, this person did this conduct on this particular day in this location, and here's the statute that they're violating. They stole a candy bar from the candy store. This is the statute that makes that illegal. And you have some specific language, some conduct in there that will show to be a violation of that statute. The law says you can't steal a candy bar. This person on this particular day did that. And now we're going to indict that person. You wouldn't get indicted for shoplifting, but you get my picture, right? And the indictments can be short or long. And sometimes they're full of information. Other times they're less full of information. Sometimes it's just kind of the nuts and bolts. And you get the rest of it through a probable cause statement or through a police report or whatever comes down the pike later down the road. So same type of process that's happening here. In the House of Representatives, as it related to Donald Trump, they were impeaching him, and they submitted what I would analogize to an indictment. They submitted, it was a 5-page document. We covered it back over on January 13th when we did our impeachment party show, and we showed you exactly what the original article of impeachment looked like, the one that was drafted by Ted Lieu. And I have a slide of it because I want to revisit it. I want to show you what the original document was, because this is how the whole impeachment party started. Everything that we were talking about, impeaching Kamala Harris, impeaching everybody, right? Every single person in Congress, we've had a lot of fun with that. But the concept here is we wanted to look at their original document and just follow their standards. What did they say? What did the Democrats say in the House of Representatives that was so egregious, that deserved impeachment? We got to be clear on what that is. This is their document. It's their impeachment proceedings. They're the ones initiating all this stuff. So they get to define the terms. They get to tell us what conduct is illegal. And this is sort of the starting document. And I want to just revisit this briefly before we dive into the memorandum that was submitted. So if you recall, the original article of impeachment was not particularly heavy on a lot of facts. I clipped out the stuff that I thought was most pertinent, and I want to just run through it briefly. Remember, it's about 4 or 5 pages, and most of it was just, hey, we're the House of Representatives, we have the authority to do this stuff. But this is where they're saying this conduct is bad. So let's revisit this, because this is the preceding document. This is going to lead in to the next memo that we're going to discuss. It says, on January 6th, pursuant to the 12th Amendment of the Constitution, the House of Representatives was meeting. They were counting the votes in the Electoral College. We got that. In the months preceding the joint session, President Trump, and you can see I underlined this in red, repeatedly issued false statements. So we're going to just take that as one of their claims of being a problem. So I have it underlined, repeatedly issued false statements. All right, we got it. They're upset about false statements that were said repeatedly. Got it. All right, they're asserting that the presidential election results were the product of widespread fraud and should not be accepted by the American people or certified by the federal or state officials. Shortly before the joint session occurred, Trump addressed a crowd in the ellipse of Washington, D.C. There, he reiterated false claims, so the same false claims, so that's not a new element. It's going to be the same false claims, and they have some specific language here now. So this is the evidence. This is the candy bar that they took without paying for. This is, we won the election, said Trump, and we won it by a landslide. So they're singling this out. It's underlined in red, and it's in quotes. They're not happy about that phrase in conjunction with this reportedly issued false statements. Got it. So now we have 2 things that they've identified that are bad, illegal conduct. All right. He also willfully made statements that, in context, encouraged and foreseeably resulted in lawless action at the Capitol, such as, we have another quote, we have a sentence, another statement that they are not happy about. And the statement, of course, we've all heard it many times. It says, quote, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore, end quote. And that's it. Then they say, thus, incited by President Trump, members of the crowd he had addressed in an attempt to, among other objectives, interfere with the joint session, unlawfully breached and vandalized the Capitol. So everything in this second paragraph, this final paragraph here, is what happened. So we're looking at the preceding activities, the preceding statements that Trump made. So these false statements plus these 2 quotes led to the breaching of the Capitol building. So we've got Trump's conduct and where it led. And this is where this whole idea of the incitement of insurrection comes from. So we have to identify, what are they talking about? If they're saying Donald Trump incited the insurrection, well, how did he do that? They have to define what that term is, and they've done that for us. They've said repeatedly issued false statements. We won this election. We won it in a landslide, which they're saying is a false statement. And then they're also saying if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Okay, so now he's saying if you don't fight like hell, implying that they're going to go and fight like hell because they want to still maintain a country. Then all of the bad things happen. And we sort of looked at this in the purview of the entire article. One little caveat on that, there was another paragraph where they were talking about the Brad Raffensperger phone call. So I left that out. I personally don't think that that's a big issue. I think that's sort of a ancillary issue that they just threw in there. That was, of course, the phone call that was between Trump, his attorneys, and Raffensperger and his attorneys to discuss what was going on with the election litigation. It was, in my mind, it was exactly a settlement conference. Same thing we have in criminal law, same thing you have in family law, juvenile law, a personal injury, they have settlement agreements and settlement cases. All sorts of these things happen in law. If you're going to have a settlement agreement about an election, guess what you have to talk about there? Votes. You have to talk about votes. Who got the votes? Where'd they go? Can you find them? What happened? How was the process of counting? All of that stuff. So they wanted to make a big deal of that because Trump used some language in there that I thought was not good. It was I wouldn't use that language. I wouldn't encourage a client to use that language, but I don't think that it was illegal or that it was overly burdensome given the context of what was being discussed there. So we're kind of going to glance over that, but just for the sake of, I would say, fullness, and I want to make sure that we're covering this thing from both ends. That is another argument that is brought up. Another reason why I'm not particularly interested in that argument is because were they going to impeach him after that phone call? Were they going to impeach him? After that came to light, after that was published, that audio was leaked, was there a sudden call to impeach him? There probably was, but was that a serious movement? No, it wasn't until the Capitol Hill stuff happened. And so in my mind, that is the threshold issue. It is the Capitol Hill speech. It is the Capitol Hill breach that is leading to an impeachable offense, not the Raffensperger phone call. So now that we know what they're talking about, and this is from their own document, right? I didn't draft this document. The Article of Impeachment has a pretty narrow scope. And what I mean by scope is the things that we're allowed to talk about. So let's go back to the candy bar analogy. You steal a candy bar, you get charged with stealing a candy bar, and you go into court. You can only talk about that candy bar. You can only talk about that day, that location, that time, what you did, that conduct in particular. If they want to come in and at the day of trial for your candy bar theft, they want to say, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to charge you with the theft of that TV also. You go, wait a minute. I didn't know I was being charged with that. It's called due process. I have a right to confront my accuser. It's the confrontation clause. We have all of these procedures in place to make sure that you don't get sprung on with different charges at the very last minute. So the scope is limited. It's only limited to the candy bar. Same type of thing is going on here. The original Article of Incitement or Article of Impeachment, which is referencing incitement, is pretty narrow. It's just about 4 pages, and it has those 3 elements, 4 if you want to include the Raffensperger stuff. Not a lot there. And so when you sort of plot that out, this is what it looks like. This is the scope of the impeachment, according to the Article of Impeachment that was submitted in the House of Representatives. And you can see here, we're talking about the false statements, which I already mentioned, the "we won by a landslide" quote. We're also looking at, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And I even put in there the Raffensperger phone call. And this is the scope. Everything else that's inside, anything that's inside of this blue circle is the stuff that we can talk about because it's within the scope. It's been identified previously. Anything that's outside of this circle, outside of this hula hoop, as it were, is not. It's outside of the scope. But something interesting happened, right? And before we get there, let's take a look at maybe there's a lot of other things that they could have talked about, right? And this is what that might be. So inside the hula hoop is the stuff that is in the Article of Impeachment, and outside, until today, all of this other stuff was outside of the scope. So Trump making, Trump's other language, Trump has made a lot of statements, a lot of tweets. We have his tweets are outside. They didn't mention that in the Article of Impeachment. Sidney Powell wasn't mentioned. Rudy Giuliani wasn't mentioned. Donald Trump wasn't mentioned. Anything that was basically outside of the non-Save America rally stuff was all outside the scope previously. The rioter causing physical damage to the Capitol building, anything about Linwood, all of the statements about the rioters, none of that was included in the original document. It was all outside of the scope. But then when we look at the new memorandum that was filed today, that's 80 pages, this is now what it looks like. Everything has been brought in. Everything from outside of the hula hoop has been just sort of crammed right inside into the scope. And you can see just how this change happened, right? It went from inside to everything that was outside. It's all inside the scope now. And the way that I sort of, my high level take on all of this is the old narrative, the old theme of this case was Trump's irresponsible rhetoric on January 6th was the direct cause of the incitement. It was the direct cause of the Capitol Hill insurrection. That narrative is now changing. It's now Trump's irresponsible rhetoric before, during, and after the January 6th Capitol Hill riots was the cause, the incitement of the Capitol Hill insurrection. And it's even worse than that. He didn't just cause what happened on Capitol Hill, but he's also now a continuing threat to America. So you see how the scope sort of changes a little bit. And I read through most of the 80 pages. I read through all of Donald Trump's response. And that's sort of just how I synthesize it into the Democrats' argument, that they're expanding the scope. And they're now saying that a lot of Trump's behavior before, after, during, his response after the Capitol Hill riots was all inappropriate. And it's all impeachable now as a result. So the scope, it gets much bigger, as we're going to see. And we even saw this sort of narrative change from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She was on an Instagram Live last night, and here she is saying that none of this took place on the 6th. Okay, this was a problem well before the 6th. And this can open up a whole can of worms. I mean, this is now where we're talking about, why did Mayor Bowser refuse to have the National Guard there or any additional federal resources? They were not there. There was a January 5th letter that she sent out, signed by her, that we covered on this channel, disavowing any additional help from the feds. Same thing. Why did the Capitol Hill Chief of Police, Stephen Sund, why was he sort of bringing to the Sergeant of Arms attention that this is a problem? We're expecting this to be an issue. And the Sergeant of Arms from both chambers in Congress just refused any additional help. Well, what the heck? So if they knew this was going to be a problem and they undersecured the facilities, is the government negligent? Are they contributory? Is their negligence contributing to this entire debacle? Or was this all just Donald Trump? Because that's what the original allegation has been. At least it was that for a while. Then Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, no, Ted Cruz tried to murder her. So it's not just Donald Trump. It's Donald Trump and Ted Cruz who tried to murder her. Literally, she said that on Twitter. We covered that. So you're seeing how the narrative is sort of unraveling just a little bit. Let's check in with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and see what she has to say. She put this on her Instagram Live. I think this was last night.
One of the things that I would like us to dispel is the idea that this insurrection and this attack happened suddenly, that we couldn't see it coming, and that it was like just this outburst and all of a sudden a bunch of people rushed the Capitol. I want to dispel with that notion very quickly, because everybody knew that something was going to happen. And again, I do not speak for any other. Let me actually rewind this. And I'll try to recenter. And again, as I said, thank you for your patience here.
You're welcome.
But what I'm about to tell you is my account, how I perceive things with my eyes, my ears, my nose, my mouth, my body. I cannot speak for what anyone else saw, etc., unless there was someone in the room with me. But here's what I will tell you. A week before, 1 week before, the week prior to the insurrection, I started to get text messages that I needed to be careful. And that in particular, I needed to be careful about the 6th.
Okay, so who the hell sent those text messages? Where did they come from? Who was warning you about that? Did you notify anybody else? Did you send that anywhere else? And maybe she explains this as we go on, but I didn't watch the whole thing. Of course, Miss Faith clipped that for us because I'm not a particular Instagram user. But that's my question. So she's saying this whole thing was planned, that this had happened previously. Up to a week, there was indication that this was going to be a big problem, and so you can't have it both ways. Either Donald Trump gave a speech on January 6th that led directly, he was the direct cause, he was the inciter of the insurrection. Or this was planned a week before and he wasn't. His speech was inconsequential because it was going to happen anyways. And Now what they're trying to do in order to respond to that, because that doesn't look so good, if this was a planned ordeal, which many people are now, new evidence is coming out that it was. I think that they were breaching the Capitol before Donald Trump was even done speaking. And it looked like, there were pipe bombs planted the night before, and there's more evidence that, other people were raising the red flags before it happened. So either Donald Trump was out there inciting this thing with his language, or he wasn't. And if he wasn't, then their impeachment facade looks like a sham. And how do they craft that then? The goalposts have to move. They have to change what the definition is. Now it's not so much about him giving a bad speech and saying, you got to fight like hell, as we saw in the original article of impeachment. Now it's different. Now the scope has to be expanded to talk about all of the other things that he has said prior to that date that nobody wanted to impeach him for until the Capitol Hill stuff happened. So now they're just sort of moving the goalposts a little bit and saying, okay, well, now all of that other conduct, all of those other tweets, everything else that was taking place between November 3rd and January 6th, he's culpable for that. He was creating this environment based on his language that led to the insurrection, which is a different argument. You may agree with it or disagree with it, but it's a different argument. The original article of impeachment said history of false statements combined with two other statements given at the Save America rally on January 6th. This new argument goes all the way back to November 3rd and even prior to November 3rd. They're saying, well, he was sowing doubts about the election before any of that even took place. And so, you just have to keep that in mind. I want to lay out a big picture framework before we dive into this memo. And just watch how much the goalposts change and how much bigger the argument gets. So let's take a look at the document. Thank you for indulging me on that 20-minute introduction. But this is now a trial memorandum that is being filed in the Senate of the United States, the sitting court of impeachment. It's in the matter of impeachment of President Donald Trump, the 45th president, trial memorandum of the United States on the impeachment trial, and it's signed by these Democrats. And you may have noticed them in the thumbnail. I think we put Ted Lieu on there, Eric Swalwell, we got Joe Quinn Castro, and I think I got Jamie Raskin on there. But these are all the House Democrats who are the impeachment managers. One of these people, I think, is a representative from the Virgin Islands, not even a congressperson. I think it's Stacey Plaskett. But if you go on the New York Times, they're doing a sort of a biography on each one of these individuals. Who is Joe Quinn Castro? Let's take a look at the guy leading the charge of Donald Trump's impeachment. What a hero. All right, so go check that out if you're interested in any of that. This is the table of contents. I wanted to just pause on this and show you how this legal document has been organized. We have an introduction, which is sort of a statement of the facts. So all of this is kind of combined in together, but just on a high level, I didn't cover all of this stuff in my slides. We do have a lot of slides, a lot of reading to get through, but you'll notice it says the statement of the facts. Donald Trump refused to accept the results of the 2020 election. He also encouraged his followers to come to Washington. Mike Pence refused to overturn the election results. It's sort of a recount of what happened. And then Donald Trump incites the insurrectionists to attack the Capitol. So we're going to spend some time on that one. Insurrectionists incited by President Trump attack the Capitol. President Trump's dereliction of duty after the attack. So see how the scope is getting way bigger. Now they're talking about what happened after the fact. Then they're also saying the House approves an article of impeachment with bipartisan support. And they have a big quote in there. I didn't put it in here, from Liz Cheney. They're really happy that they got some Republicans who are also upset about this stuff. Then we get into the argument. And a lot of this, I just took out the important, pertinent parts. There's a lot of old history and old language, and they're comparing it to other prior cases, other prior impeachment proceedings. But the main arguments are that he committed a high crime and misdemeanor. And I'm talking, of course, about President Trump. He violated his oath of office, attacked the democratic process, imperiled Congress, undermined national security. Those are the main arguments. Then they're saying there is no defense. So this is sort of a pre-buttal. They're anticipating what Donald Trump and his defense team are going to be saying, and then they're rebutting it before they say it. They're saying that there was no defense for Trump's conduct. The impeachment process that took place in the House was fair. There was strong evidence of criminality. The election results are not in question, and free speech is not an issue, which is going to be very interesting to see because it's a free speech argument. The Senate has jurisdiction to try this impeachment, and this is a big part of this entire document. So you're going to see here from page 48 down to about page 71. That's all about jurisdiction. It's talking about the Constitutional Convention, the constitutional text and the structure, and they're going back to former officials in England, early American states were subject to impeachment and disqualification. And this is where we're talking a lot about the jurisdiction of the Senate. This has been a major argument, and I think this is where the crux of the case is going to lay. Remember that I think last week it was Rand Paul submitted or passed a resolution calling for a vote, and he wanted all of the other senators to make a mark. Where do you stand on this? Do you think this is a constitutional proceeding or not? And I think 44 of them said, no, it's not constitutional because the Senate doesn't have jurisdiction. So I think, truthfully, I think the impeachment trial is a foregone conclusion. I think Trump's going to be acquitted again a second time, which will be historical for him, trying to be impeached twice and acquitted twice. All right, so let's get into the introduction. This is how it starts. And I'm going to kind of try to go through this a little bit fast because I don't want to just be reading all day here. But it says the trial arises from President Donald Trump's incitement of insurrection. They're saying he swore to protect the republic and he didn't do that. Now the Senate should disqualify him. And they go through a little bit of history here. On January 6th, Vice President presiding, blah, 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 blah. The ritual has a mark of peaceful transfer of power, and everything was kumbaya until President Trump. You see that 3-word sentence there? Until President Trump. Okay, got it. In his grievous betrayal of his oath of office, Donald Trump, and there we see this again, he incited a violent mob to attack the U.S. Capitol. And so they're saying he did something, okay? He was the actor. He specifically incited the attack. And so we're looking for them to prove that. They stormed the Capitol. They yelled out, "Hang Mike Pence, traitor, traitor, traitor." They assaulted everybody. And then many officials barely escaped the rioters, and Congress's counting of the electoral votes was delayed until nightfall and not completed until 4 a.m. And I don't think that had anything to do with the rioters. We saw that there were 2 other objections. I think Josh Hawley was objecting to Pennsylvania, and somebody else was, if I can remember correctly, was objecting to Georgia. And so, they got back into the congressional building, I would say maybe 8 o'clock. Arizona time, and then they counted for another 4 or 5 hours until 4 a.m. And I'm not sure what time zone they're using, but many people are saying this is a coup. And you look at what happens in Myanmar, formerly Burma, and okay, that's a coup. They were back to work in like 4 hours, 5 hours, and they finished the job that same day. So I don't know how in jeopardy the control of the federal government was here in the United States, but based on what I saw, it wasn't even remotely close. Not even, I don't know, a 1/10 of 1%, maybe 100th of 1% likelihood that they were going to get control of this country, maybe a millionth of 1%. It was not happening. And, and now they're sort of going through this big, spiel here, and they're being very dramatic about it as they go through the language. But this is what you should do in a legal brief, right? You want to state your case. You're being argumentative. And so you can't fault them for that. They're making their claim, and they know that people like me and people throughout the media are going to cover this stuff. And so they want to be very aggressive and colorful with their language. That's why they say things like grievous betrayal, incited a violent mob attack. It's an argumentative document. It's not a formal, I would say, legal memorandum where you are not making an argument, you're just reporting on what the law is. They're being very aggressive. This is kind of their opening argument that they know the media and the American people are going to gobble up. So let's get back to it. Trump's responsibility for the events on January 6th is unmistakable. So now we're going back directly to the January 6th date. Okay. After losing in 2020, he refused to accept the will of the American people, and he spent months asserting without evidence. So they're saying without any evidence that he won in a landslide. But every single court to consider the president's attacks on the outcome rejected them. And we spent a lot of time on this channel. We talked a lot about whether the courts actually heard evidence, and some of them heard, I would say, very, very minimal evidence, but most of these lawsuits were dismissed on mootness, ripeness, latches. Any standing was a huge issue. They were all basically nothing. I don't think I saw a single lawsuit, we probably covered 20 of them here, that ever reached the merits of the underlying claims. And I still, to this day, have not seen a single lawsuit that tells us whether or not the courts can just, on their own, sua sponte, without any outside influence, change the rules of the election. Because that is what happened. We talked about that. Now, the Supreme Court has declined to hear those cases. So some legal commentators will say, well, we know that they can. They actually can, because in Pennsylvania, the Supreme Court changed how the election was supposed to be conducted. And that was in contravention to what the Pennsylvania legislature said was part of Act 77. It was already in the law. The Supreme Court said, hey, we got COVID now, we got to change all these things. They changed the rules at the last minute, and those cases went up to appeal in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, we're not getting involved. We're not going to hear the case. And so other commentators are saying, okay, well, the Supreme Court, that was their opinion. They chimed in and they said, no, we're not going to hear it. And so they say, well, so everybody refers to that and says, okay, well, that means that what the court did was okay. The Supreme Court is not upset about that. They're not going to overturn that. They're not even going to weigh in on it. So they're allowed to continue to do that. And if you're satisfied with that, if you're somebody who's on that side of the argument and you think that's we got what we needed, right? The Supreme Court says you can do that. Well, then you can just take that one step further, and every single court throughout the entire United States now at this point in time can change the rules. That's the precedent. And so for many people like me, we're just saying, hey, maybe this is a good time for the Supreme Court to tell us how the hell we can run our elections. Because what happened here is we had legislatures passing laws and rules, Supreme Courts changing them, the legislature delegating this stuff over to the executive branch of the state government. So governors and board of electors and electoral commissions and all of these different executive, branch, secretary of states and all of that, they can literally take the rules that the legislature embodied in the law and modify them at will. That happened in multiple places around the country. And many people were just wondering, is that okay? Can we keep doing that? And we never got an answer from the Supreme Court. So they're saying that there was without evidence, right? No evidence. Don't mention the hundred of affidavits, the hundreds of hours of testimony that was given, none of the procedural violations that took place, like the observation stuff, never heard. A lot of the audits were not conducted completely, whether there were, any transparency issues with data providers and how to account for all of these little permutations here and there. It just never got heard. So there was some evidence, but it never got into many different courts. The only one, in all fairness, that I think actually did something was Arizona, where they did a partial audit. They redid the audit, and it didn't show much of anything. So they dumped that case. Now they're appealing it. It's going on and on and on. But most of these other cases were just not heard. So I think that is a little bit inaccurate. Without evidence, and they attacked the outcome. Every single election court, they're saying, rejected them. I disagree with that. By the end of the day, the end of the rally, Trump spent months. So now they're going backwards. They spent months using his bully pulpit. And the joint session of Congress was the final act of the vast plot to destroy America. Love that language. Very powerful language. As a result, and has been widely reported, now we're going in. Watch the scope expand. Now we have Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump's lawyer. His lawyer called for here, trial by combat. All right. Then his son got on there and said, hey, we're coming for you. Finally, then President Trump jumped in, and this is where we see the language again. We see fight like hell. You're not going to have a country anymore. You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength. You have to be strong, right? And this is the language that is problematic, and they're stacking it on top of this other language from the president's son and from Rudy Giuliani. Now, we will see that there is other language in there from Trump's speech. So this is what he said at 18 minutes and 16 seconds into his Capitol Hill speech. He said, I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. So I just wanted to point that out, right? He also said some other things, and they go in very, very far later down in the document, and they say he did say that, but it was at the beginning of the speech, and everything else that he layered on after that was sort of code language that, I have to say peaceful, but you guys know what I mean, right? You know that I'm just saying that because I have to say that, but I really want you to go and nuke the building, right? That's kind of the implication there. The document goes on. Let's take a look. It says, President Trump committed this high crime and misdemeanor amid his final days in office. Given the clarity of the evidence and the egregiousness of wrongdoing, the House improved the Article of Impeachment for incitement of insurrection. Presidents do not get a free pass to commit high crimes and misdemeanors near the end of their term. And this is a new argument that we've been seeing a lot of. Basically, it's sort of this, there's no recourse if this impeachment doesn't move forward. In other words, they're saying that a president in the last couple weeks of their term has the full ability to go out there and just break the law willy-nilly. They can do whatever they want because there's no recourse. They cannot be impeached. But they're forgetting that there are many other avenues for repercussions for presidents who do that. Things like criminal charges and special counsels. And you can literally, charge a former president with that. If they're out of office, if they commit a crime their last day in office and they don't pardon themselves, or that, the pardon doesn't extend after they're out of office, then you just have a prosecutor who comes in and charges them with a crime, just like anybody else. They're a private citizen, charge them with a crime, as long as the statute of limitations doesn't expire. So there's a lot of other avenues for that. So we're going to see that argument brought up time and time again in this. Let's go to the statement of facts, get past some of that introduction. President Trump refuses to accept the 2020 election. And this is where they start going into their big laundry list of stuff. Before a single voter cast a vote on 2020 presidential election day, President Trump made it clear he had no intention of abiding by the verdict of the American people. And they're referencing a lot of his tweets, which are no longer available for us to check out. But some of these footnotes are pointing to tweets. In July 2020 interview, he said that he refused to agree that he would accept the results. And so now what they're doing is they're just sort of establishing that Donald Trump has a history of this stuff. He's saying saying that there was a conspiracy to defraud him. Right. And in my opinion, I think Donald Trump believes that. Right. And I think a lot of Americans do believe that there was a conspiracy to defraud him. That's his interpretation of it. They disagree with it. But that's what they're upset about. He's saying on August 17th, before the election, the only way we're going to lose is if the election is rigged. It goes on. Trump applied particularly intense pressure to Georgia officials. So I wanted to just point this part out. There's a whole paragraph about that Raffensperger phone call. President Trump tweeted about Raffensperger 17 times. Thanksgiving Day, he called him an enemy of the people. He also said so this is where they now are tying in outside statements. So watch how this goes. Enemy of the people. So on Thanksgiving Day, he said Raffensperger was an enemy of the people, reflecting an ominous pattern that would recur many times over the weeks that followed. President Trump's on Raffensperger sparked threats of death and violence. And then they just sort of put a brief pause here. One such message warned that, quote, and sort of you read this and you sort of think that Donald Trump said this, and he didn't, but somebody else did. They said the Raffensperger should be put on trial for treason and face execution. So Trump didn't say that. Somebody else did. And now they're including that in this laundry list of problems. Nonetheless, President Trump continued his assault on Raffensperger, and other people told him to stop doing that. President Trump, they campaigned to reverse the election results to keep himself in the White House. Donald Trump reportedly called one of Georgia's election lead investigators, urging him to, quote, find the fraud, and claiming that an official would be a national hero if he did. And this is where he said, I just want to find 11,000 votes, which is more than we have because we won the state. Now, some of this language I don't think is particularly good, right? He said something like, this could be a criminal offense. It's a big risk to you. But when we went through that, we covered this call on this show. It was borderline. It wasn't anything that I would recommend, anybody say in a settlement conference like that. But in my mind, it still was a settlement conference. And what he was saying wasn't necessarily inaccurate. So, that's the purpose of a settlement conference, is to discuss the issues candidly. It's to be very open about it. When we do it in criminal law, can bring the whole family into court, and the family can ask the prosecutor point blank, hey, why do you want to send my son to prison for 10 years for marijuana? Why do you want to do that? And the prosecutor can say that, and they can say, yeah, well, how about this, right? And you can get into it a little bit. It's kind of the whole point of a settlement conference. You got to reach a settlement, and you have to hash out the issues, which in my mind is all they were doing on that day. So let's move on. Under Section B, we have President Trump encourages his followers to come to Washington on January 6th to fight. So we're using this language again in parentheses. We got fight, fight, fight. Every single politician in the history of the country has said that word at some point in their time, in their elected time, to rally their supporters to do something. Everybody says fight. Following the Electoral College count vote, President Trump fixated on January 6th, the date of the joint session, presenting his last best hope to reverse the election, even as he continued improperly pressuring state officials, DOJ, and members of Congress to overturn the electoral outcome. He sharply escalated his public statements using incendiary and violent language to urge supporters to, quote, stop the steal. That's where he says it was rigged, stolen, fight like hell, fight to the death, act of war, can't let it happen, won't take it anymore. Okay, so now they're defining the other language. We already saw that they were unhappy that he said fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. So they're just going through and identifying other language that they can lump into this big impeachment document. Can't let it happen, won't take it anymore. And then he said, come to the rally, it's going to be wild. Indeed, it was obvious and entirely foreseeable that the furious crowd assembled before President Trump was primed and prepared for violence if he lit a spark. Okay, which is accurate. It sounds like it was accurate. It was foreseeable. The government knew about it. Sounds like the FBI knew about it. They were arresting the Proud Boys. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez knew about it. I think the only people who didn't know about it were the ones responsible for security on that day. Mayor Bowser disavowed the feds. The sergeant of arms didn't like the optics of it. These Democrat authors, they knew about it. Why didn't they tell anybody? Why didn't AOC tell anybody? Maybe this whole thing could have been avoided. On January 6th, President Trump and others, they attempted to overturn the election, failed, including his schemes at the DOJ. On January 4th, he gave an angry speech in Dalton. Democrats are trying to steal the White House. You can't let it happen. You can't let it happen. They're taking this White House. We're going to fight like hell. I'm telling you right now. All right, so they're going back before January 6th, all the way to January 4th. They have another one on January 5th, and they're just referencing every single tweet, right? Tweet December 26, December 26. We have a number 42, January 1st. We have some other ones down here, and a rally speech. In all these ways and more, as we will show at trial, President Trump created a powder keg on January 6th. Hundreds were prepared for violence in his direction. They were prepared to do whatever it took to keep him in power. All they needed to hear was that their president needed to, quote, fight like hell. Needed them to fight like hell. All they needed was for President Trump to strike a match. So you see the narrative's changing, right? Now it's everything was percolating already, and Donald Trump was the one responsible for creating that rising tide, and then he just turned it loose, which is different than the original language that we saw in the original article and in the political commentary. Paragraph D, Section D, President Trump does incite the insurrectionists to attack the Capitol. So this is sort of the big question. All right, if he incited the insurrectionists, how did he do it? Shortly before noon, he took the stage, and there was a podium. There was his lawyer previously, trial by combat, so they're referencing that. Now this is evidence that they're referencing. This is why I keep talking about this. They're including other language from other people that are not Donald Trump. We've got Rudy Giuliani. Donald Trump praised Rudy Giuliani, saying he's got guts, he fights, which he did. He was flying all over the country fighting. Over the following hour, President Trump reiterated claims that Democrats had stolen the election, and then he exhorted to the crowd, fight much harder, stop the steal, take back our country. Right? Once again, same language that everybody uses. He also demanded that Vice President Pence illegally interfere, and the crowd assembled to stop the massive fraud taking place at the Capitol. At numerous points during the rally, he urged the crowd toward the Capitol, where the joint session was about to start. 20 minutes into the rally, Trump said that those marching on the Capitol should do so peacefully. So you see that? We gave you that full quote in context, but they just say here peacefully. But then they say he spoke. And then it just goes on into this laundry list you can see here. For another 50 minutes, using highly inflammatory rhetoric, exactly the kind of language calculated to incite violence. So how do you determine that? How do you determine what that is? What kind of standard is that? Anything you say that somebody does something bad as a result of listening to, you're responsible for that now? And how do they know how this was calculated based on the statements? Did they intend that to happen? Do you really think Donald Trump intended for the Capitol building to be stormed? The language was calculated to incite violence, given what had been reported about the crowd. He declared, we fight like hell. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. So this is the language they're very upset about that they keep referencing. Videos of the crowd eliminate any doubt that his words, in fact, incited the crowd to commit violence. He told the crowd, you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength. Supporters can be heard loudly shouting, take the Capitol right now, invade the Capitol building. Don't know if Donald Trump knew that. Don't know if he was giving him a thumbs up. Okay, I hear you. Go do it. He just said something and people ran with it. And so now they're trying to connect that back to him, which is such a dangerous precedent. I can't even tell you how dangerous that is. I mean, you can understand that, right? I mean, if you say something, anything, and somebody interprets it one way and does something about that, you want to be held accountable for that? There's a lot of wild people in this world who will do things. That's on them, not on you. They're trying to make speech incredibly dangerous. And it's not, folks. At another point, the crowd interrupting him with chants of fight for Trump. The president did not try to soothe their aggression because it was at a rally. He smiled and said, thank you, thank you. As the crowd instantly recognized the tenor of his speech and his repeated demand that they, quote, fight like hell and show strength, belied any desire for a peaceful demonstration. Those who come to the rally looking for a signal from their president found it in his remarks. Rather than quell the crowd, urge peaceful demonstration, which he did, by the way, or promise to carry on the fight over the years to come, the overwhelming thrust of President Trump's remarks delivered to an armed, angry crowd widely known to be prepared for violence. Oh, it just drives me nuts. If it was so widely known, why were they not prepared for it? He said that this article says this was a militaristic demand that they must fight to stop what was occurring in the Capitol at that very moment. So Donald Trump, in his speech, gave a militaristic command to his followers to go overtake the Capitol building. Did they watch the same speech that I watched? All right. Paragraph E says, insurrectionists incited by President Trump then attacked the Capitol. Now what we have in the next, I think, 7 pages from page 22 to 29 is a lot of this stuff. So they go through sort of a litany of all the problems that happened after the breach. And they said, provoked and incited by President Trump, who told them to, quote, fight like hell. Again, they're going to keep saying that. Hundreds of insurrectionists arrived at the Capitol, launched an assault, a seditious, deadly attack against the legislative branch and vice president without parallel in American history. And they said a bunch of awful things. Hang Mike Pence, tell Pelosi we're coming for her. Capitol Police dragged furniture to barricade the House chamber. So they're just going through and they're saying terrible, terrible. Capitol Police strike, terrible. Gunshots were heard outside. Got it. Terrible. Once inside, insurrectionists desecrated and vandalized the Capitol. Got it. Mark it. Some erected gallows. Got that. Rummaged through. Yes, I know. Live stream video. And then declared that our president wants us here. Okay, so did Donald Trump call them and tell them that? These are people interpreting his language, and they're using it for their own ends. Okay, so another one says she answered the call of her president, echoing the views of other participants. So it's just about 7 pages of what we saw, right? We all saw it happen. It was grotesque behavior. I'm not endorsing it at all. I just don't think that Donald Trump giving a speech is what caused it. I think there were a lot of other things that were leading up to that. And just to say that Donald Trump, by giving a speech and by, complaining about the election for a couple months, caused all of that single-handedly is ridiculous. President Trump's dereliction of duty during the attack. So now they're going to go through and they're going to lump in everything that happened after it. So apparently this is somehow evidence of incitement because of what happened after. I don't know if he's going to incite another thing or whatever, but this is after the fact. They're upset about it. Armed insurrectionists breached the Capitol, and as Vice President Pence, Congress, and they described it, borderline enthusiastic. It meant the certification was being derailed, according to somebody. Senior administration officials described Trump as delighted. They report that he was walking around the White House confused by why other people on his team weren't excited as he was, and against Capitol Police trying to get into the building. These feelings were reflected by his actions, and this is where you're basically mind reading. All of this stuff in most situations would never get into court. It's hearsay. It's other people saying what other people were doing and saying. It's hearsay documents. Or hearsay statements. Here, what did Donald Trump say? What did Donald Trump do? What were his specific actions? And now they're trying to say his actions match the narrative that they got from some insiders, some leakers somewhere inside the organization. 149 insurrectionists had overcome the perimeter. 2:24, 30 minutes later, while rioters were still attacking the police, Trump posted a tweet. And he said Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution. I disagreed with that tweet. I thought it was a bad tweet. It was not appropriate given what was going on. But what does that have to do with him inciting the insurrection? It does. In my mind, it has basically nothing to do with it. Okay, it's Mike Pence. It's a political disagreement. Donald Trump said that he should have been able to do something. We talked about this here on the show. Mike Pence didn't have the authority to do it. I've been a big defender of Mike Pence on this channel. I think that he had no lawful authority, no constitutional authority to choose an uncertified slate of electors over a certified slate of electors. There's nothing in the Constitution or in any of the rules that we read that gives him the ability to do that, and he didn't do that. Donald Trump had a political disagreement about that, and there are a lot of people, and there's even some constitutional, attorneys and people who say, this is up for debate. Not that Mike Pence has the authority to do it, but just that the rules aren't clear. And we went through the rules here. We went through, Section 15 of the U.S. Code. We looked at that. Section 12, Section 7 through 12, 7 through 15. There's a lot of them. We covered them on this channel. You can have some reasonable disagreement and some reasonable debate about that. Donald Trump was expressing that. Was it an appropriate time to do that? No, not at all. Right? At that moment, in my mind, it should have been something that was all hands on deck. And he didn't respond that way. But is that a crime, or is that just leadership that I disagree with? Right? And it wasn't that much longer. At 2:24, then he made that statement. Then shortly thereafter at 3:13, he issued a second statement and other additional tweets. So at 2:38 and 3:13, he issued a second. Those tweets told his followers then, and I was there, we were following this minute by minute here in my office. I was, support our Capitol Police and law enforcement, stay peaceful. All right, that went out. And then he sent another one. He asked everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful, no violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order. These tweets were obviously totally ineffectual at stopping the violence. They did not reflect any substantial effort on the part of the president to protect Congress, which is just an opinion statement. He came out, he gave the appropriate statement. Came a little bit late, but you don't know what the circumstances were for him, how informed he was. I'm not real sure that they knew what the hell was going on there, right? At one point in time, we played videos of law enforcement opening the doors to people, welcoming everybody in. So if Donald Trump got that report and said, yeah, there's disorder over there, but I don't know that people are being killed. I don't see the havoc that's being caused. He could have been en route right back to the White House in a car, and nobody really told him what was going on. Who knows, right? I don't know. Neither did they. but they're just jumping into conclusions, and they're saying that he was inciting insurrection by not responding appropriately to the insurrection, sort of welcoming the insurrection, which I don't think there's any evidence for that. The violence he had provoked, unsurprisingly, continued after President Trump released his video. So they want him to release a video, then he does release a video, and it's unsurprisingly ineffective. So the guy can't do anything. If he releases a video, it's not effective. If he doesn't release a video, he should have released a video. Then Donald Trump has another tweet later in the night, also very Trump, and not something I endorse or agree with. But that's Trump, and this is what he said. He said, "These are things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from the great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever." He posted that at 6:01 on January 6th. I don't have a defense of that tweet. I don't think I wouldn't have ever said anything like that if I were in his position, but he felt the need to say it. And is that a crime to say that? I think a lot of people in the country were probably feeling that way. Not endorsing that feeling, just telling you. This goes on. The House approved an article of impeachment with bipartisan support. All right, so in light of the crisis, 5 days after the assault on the Capitol, articles of impeachment were introduced and signed. And during this hearing, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee submitted a 50-page report documenting the committee's findings in support of impeachment, which I never saw that, right? We never saw that. At the conclusion of this hearing, the Rules Committee adopted a recorded vote, a special rule providing for House debate on the resolution. That's their introduction. That's their facts. So you see how much bigger the scope gets. It's now everything Trump said, everything he said before, everything he said after, all of his conduct during. It's all within the purview now. Then it changes gear and we start talking about the defense. There is no defense for President Trump's conduct. Every argument that may be raised, this is wild, every argument that may be raised in President Trump's defense further demonstrates that he is a danger to our democratic system of government. So one more time, any argument that may be raised, this says every argument that may be raised in President Trump's defense further demonstrates that he is a danger to our democratic system of government. So if you even make an argument to defend yourself, you're a threat to democracy. That's what that says. Look at it. Read it. If you even raise a defense now, it just shows, it further demonstrates what a danger to our democratic system of government you are. All right. I guess that's one way to run a country. Fair impeachment process. Then he incited a mob to attack Congress during the joint session. The House's expeditious response to this attack was both necessary and appropriate. There was no doubt that Congress will act decisively in favor of such extraordinary abuse, which threaten not only the peaceful transfer of power, but also the very lives of senior government officials. Any claim that the House moved too quickly in responding to the violent insurrection that President Trump incited is mistaken, as they say. And this is where we learn a little bit about their thoughts. They are a grand jury and a prosecutor, the House is, under the Constitution. The events that form the basis for the impeachment occurred in plain view. They are well known to the American people. Many members of Congress were witness to its conduct. There is no basis on which President Trump could assert what a horrified nation saw with its own eyes and heard with its own ears. Accordingly, the House acted within its constitutional responsibilities in swiftly and emphatically approving an article of impeachment. So I love when I see legal documents that say there's no basis for something. Well, there's no basis. Well, Trump's legal team just came up with a basis. If it occurred in plain view, then why are we saying plain view? If it's so well known, if it's so mistaken, very conclusory language, sort of sloppy legal drafting, in my opinion. But Trump has some sloppy legal drafting too. We're going to get there in a minute. Criminality as another defense that they say is not justified. The Constitution authorizes impeachment and conviction for high crimes and misdemeanors. As Hamilton explained in the Federalist Papers, impeachable offenses are of a nature with which may be peculiar propriety and be denominated political, as they relate chiefly to injuries done immediately to society itself. So what Alexander Hamilton is saying is that this is a political trial. Offenses against the Constitution are different than offenses against the criminal code. The only question here is whether President Trump committed offenses justifying the conviction and disqualification from future office holding. Right? So he agrees it's a political trial. So that's what they're referencing. So Donald Trump, one of the original arguments here was that he didn't get a fair shake in the House of Representatives. It was called a snap impeachment. They did it very quickly. Jonathan Turley has a good article about that on his website if you want to read through it. But it happened very quickly with not much due process. And so this argument is that the impeachment was fair because Donald Trump wasn't entitled to due process. He didn't get any of those same benefits that you would get if you were being charged or indicted with a crime. I mean, the House in this own article says that they are prosecutors and a grand jury. Well, if you're a prosecutor and you get indicted in a grand jury, you have some due process in those things, right? They don't just get to do whatever the hell they want with you in your case. There are some rules, case law, statutory provisions that say you get some due process in those proceedings. Donald Trump really didn't get any of that. So they're sort of going in here and they're preempting his rebuttal that when he makes the claim that we didn't get a fair shake. They're going to say, yeah, you did, because Alexander Hamilton is acknowledging, just like we all know today, that this is a political trial and you're not entitled to the same stuff. Right? So that's also an argument. Election results. President Trump may persist in asserting that he actually won. He may also suggest that his abuse of office is somehow justified or excused because it was rigged. Any such argument would rest upon demonstrable falsehood about the legitimacy of election results. So I think this is kind of a bait argument. They want him to get in there and talk about the election results. And I just don't think that is going to happen. We're going to get to the Trump team and his defense and their response here shortly. But you have to back this up a little bit. Who is the audience? Who is the juror in the Senate? Who are the jurors? Well, technically, it's the senators, right? They're the ones who are going to vote on whether to convict Donald Trump or not. But are they really the audience? Are they really the jurors? Or are there a couple other layers there? Are we also talking about the media? Are we also talking about their constituencies? The senators are sort of placeholders for those two different entities. And I would say the media is probably more important to them than their constituencies, many of them. Not all of them. So what happens if you go in there and you want to relitigate the electoral issues? Well, the media is going to go hog wild over that, right? You're not going to get through that bubble. And many people are sort of over those arguments in their constituencies. And so if Donald Trump and his team went in there and they argued that the election was indeed fraudulent, I think they would alienate the media, of course, and probably alienate enough people in their constituencies that it might warrant them to change their vote and shift course and vote to convict him. And I think the Democrats might want that, right? This rigged election stuff. It's tactically to their advantage. The other argument that they're doing a pre-buttal about is free speech. The First Amendment, they say, exists to protect our democratic system, which is an interesting perspective. It supports the right to vote and ensures a robust public debate. The right of speech and political participation mean little if the president can provoke lawless action if he loses at the polls. So it sounds a little bit circular there, but all right. President Trump's incitement of deadly violence to interfere with the peaceful transfer of power and overturn the results was a direct assault on the core First Amendment principles. Holding him accountable through conviction would vindicate First Amendment freedoms, which certainly offer no excuse or defense for the destructive conduct. Most fundamentally, the First Amendment protects private citizens from the government. It does not protect government officials from accountability for their own abuses in office. So Trump does not get First Amendment protections according to them. Therefore, as scholars from across the political spectrum have recognized, the First Amendment does not apply at all to an impeachment proceeding. So it doesn't count, according to them. The question in this case is not whether to inflict liability or punishment on a private citizen. Instead, the Senate must decide whether to safeguard the nation's constitutional order by disqualifying an official who committed egregious misconduct. As one scholar writes, the First Amendment does not shrink the scope of the impeachment power or alter what conduct would fall within the term of high, and we're missing a word, crimes. We got a couple errors in both these documents, high crimes and misdemeanors. All right. So no free speech. If you're an elected official, if you're the president of the country, you don't get free speech. You don't get to participate in politics. If you say something that leads to something bad, don't come back and say that was free speech, buddy boy. That's not okay. We're still going to impeach the hell out of you because it's a different standard. It's a political standard. They're not impeaching him for the incitement of the insurrection. They're impeaching him for saying dangerous political things that they don't like. They're expanding the scope of this thing that encompasses everything. The constitutional text and the structure, it contains several provisions addressing the impeachment. Careful review of the text and the structure permits a single conclusion, that the Senate has jurisdiction. So this we've talked a lot about, the constitutional text. Specifically, we've talked about the conjunctive phrase there. There's a comma and then the word and. Removal from office, comma, and disqualification from future office. This is where they're addressing that argument. And this is an interesting argument. If you're on the Democratic side, you're looking at this and you're saying, yeah, they're two separate things. They're two separate penalties. You can impose either one of those at will. You can convict somebody if they're already out of office. That's okay. You can just rely on that secondary phrase, the disqualification from running again in the future. Republicans and Trump and I think myself, I fall in this category. It's an and. It's conjunctive. It's removal from office, comma, and disqualification. Not or. Not removal from office or disqualification. It's and. One precedes the other. I think it's pretty basic statutory construction, but they're not making that claim. They go on. Article 1 of the Constitution defines the power. It uses unqualified language. The House has jurisdiction over the impeachment. Article 1 provides for two separate possible judgments in any impeachment case: removal and disqualification. Nowhere does the Constitution suggest that an impeachment is permitted only when both judgments can be imposed. Instead, it treats them as distinct penalties, mandating only that the Senate not exceed them in rendering the judgment. The separate availability of disqualification without any suggestion that it must necessarily follow removal confirms that former officials like President Trump can be tried by the Senate. Finally, they refer to a person and party and not a civil officer, and I skipped over that argument. Here's the conclusion. President Trump falsely asserted that he won the 2020 election. He sought to overturn its results. He and his supporters filed dozens of lawsuits nationwide, including before judges he had appointed, but their claims uniformly failed to persuade. He also tried to convince state and federal election officials and law enforcement personnel to attempt to reverse the election outcome. Those attempts failed too. The only honorable path at that point was for Trump to accept the results and concede his defeat. Instead, he summoned a mob to Washington, exhorted them into a frenzy, aimed them like a loaded cannon down in Pennsylvania Avenue. As the Capitol was overrun, President Trump reportedly delighted. And rather than take immediate steps to quell the violence, he left his vice president and Congress to fend for themselves. And I think there may have been another paragraph there, but it was sort of conclusory. Respectfully submitted by these individuals, all Democrats, in the House of Representatives. So that is their memorandum. Largely, I think is pretty good, actually. It's 80 pages. I'm kind of critical of it because I think this whole thing is kind of bubbled down into a charade. And I don't like this new standard where everything that you say is now criminalized or politically controversial. I do not like this. We're seeing how this is snowballing and trickling down into the rest of the country. We're seeing people deplatformed. We're seeing criminal charges filed for political memes. We're seeing all sorts of egregious stuff. Censorship and down the road. And I just don't like it. So let's take a look at Donald Trump and their response. They filed this today. In the Senate of the United States of America, answer of the president, Donald John Trump, the 45th president, to Article 1, incitement of insurrection, which was the underlying document that we talked about at the start of the show. To the honorable, the members of the Unites. Another typo right there. See that? These lawyers, man. All right. The 45th president, Donald Trump, through his counsel, they break down the allegations into 8 averments. Let's take a look at what they are. Number 1, the Constitution provides the House of... So let me just... I kind of jumped into that quickly. This is the allegation that they are summarizing from the Democrats. They're saying this is their point of contention. So it's like a question. This is the issue they're identifying. Here the issue is the president shall be removed from office on impeachment and conviction for other high crimes and misdemeanors. And they're saying the Constitution says that. That's what the Democrats are saying, and they are responding. So it's question and answer. The answer, admitted in part, denied in part, as not relevant to any matter properly before the Senate. What does that sound like? Jurisdiction. So the first answer is that no, the Senate doesn't even have jurisdiction to be here. They're saying, yeah, look, we admit it. It's admitted the constitutional provision is accurately reproduced. You got that right. The Constitution does say that, but it's denied that the quoted provision currently applies to the 45th president since he is no longer the, quote, president. The constitutional provision requires that a person actually hold office to be impeached. Since the 45th president is no longer president, the clause, quote, shall be removed from office on impeachment for is impossible for the Senate to accomplish, and thus the current proceeding before the Senate is void ab initio as a legal nullity that runs patently contrary to the plain language of the Constitution. Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution says, quote, judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal from office. And there it is, disqualification to hold and enjoy an office of honor, with the emphasis added. Since removal from office by the Senate of the president is a condition precedent which must occur before and jointly with disqualification to hold future office, the fact that the Senate presently is unable to remove him because his term expired means, number one, is therefore irrelevant to any matter before the Senate. You're going to see this a lot. Basically, anything now is a jurisdictional problem. So they're using some of the same arguments that they got hosed on with the election litigation. Let's go on. Under number 2, they look section number 3 of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, and this is the insurrection part of the 14th. It says, engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the U.S. from holding any office under the United States. Number 2, same thing, admitted in part. Yeah, we admit, Trump's team says, that section 3 of the 14th Amendment is correctly replicated in their document. It's denied, however, that he engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States. Pretty simple response. He believes and therefore avers that as a private citizen, the Senate has no jurisdiction over his ability to hold office, and anything that is contrary to that would be a bill of attainder in violation of Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3. They asked the Senate to dismiss number 2 related to the 14th Amendment as moot. Number 3, same argument, similar argument, that he violated his oath to faithfully execute the office of the presidency. Denied. They denied that he failed to uphold his oath, and they're saying it's irrelevant. It is denied that he ever engaged in a violation of his oath. To the contrary, at all times, faithfully executed his duties, never engaged in any high crimes and misdemeanors. So, not a lot of substance in this answer, but 45th president is no longer president, like we already said. The current proceeding is void ab initio. They're moot and a nullity. Same thing, number 4. He engaged in high crimes and misdemeanors, and they're saying their argument that they're summarizing here is on January 6th, pursuant to the 12th Amendment, they met. In the months preceding, he repeatedly issued false statements, and the results were the product of widespread fraud. All right? They say admitted in part and denied in part. It's admitted on January 6th, a joint session was taking place. It's also admitted that after November 3rd, the 45th president exercised his First Amendment right under the Constitution to express his belief that the election results were suspect, since with very few exceptions under the convenient guise of COVID-19 pandemic, quote, safeguards, states' election laws and procedures were changed by local politicians or judges without the necessary approvals from the state legislatures, which is the exact argument that we've been talking about here for a long time. What is the answer about that? We still don't have one. Insufficient evidence exists upon which a reasonable jurist can conclude that the statements were accurate or not. So it's up in the air, right? It cannot be definitively disproven according to them. And he therefore denies they were false. Like all Americans, he's protected by the First Amendment. He believes and therefore avers that the United States is unique on earth in that its governing documents, the Constitution and Bill of Rights, intentionally and specifically protect unpopular speech from government retaliation, which I absolutely agree with. If the First Amendment protected only speech the government deemed popular in current American culture, it would be no protection at all. Since the 45th president is no longer president, it's all void, right? And it's all irrelevant. So they're taking a strong stance on the free speech stuff, which I am strongly in favor of, and I think they're right. The president can say dumb things. The president can say stupid things. The president can say what Trump said. Is it illegal to express your opinion about the outcome of an election? Because the media and the other government officials said that it was 100% certain? If you oppose anything that the government tells you now, is that illegal? That is not free speech anymore? Is that the type of country we want to be living in? The First Amendment is not there to protect perfect, acceptable speech. It's to protect gross, horrendous, awful things that the government would like to criminalize. Shortly before the joint session commenced, President Trump addressed a crowd at the Capitol Ellipse. He iterated false claims that we won this election, we won it by a landslide. Admitted it in part, denied in part. It's admitted that he addressed a crowd. Yeah, no question about that. And he expressed his opinion that the results were suspect, as is contained in a full recording of the speech. They say paragraph 5 alleges his opinion is factually in error. The president denies that allegation, right? So he's still saying, yeah, we won it by a landslide. If you say that's inaccurate, going to deny that. Paragraph 6, he also willfully, and this is the Democrats now saying, he also willfully in that context encouraged and foreseeably resulted in lawless action at the Capitol, saying if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Thus, incited by President Trump, they stormed the Capitol, killed law enforcement, and other sedition. Admitted in part, denied in part. It's admitted that persons unlawfully breached and vandalized the Capitol. People were injured, killed. Seditious acts is a term of art within legal meaning, and the use of the phrase in the Article of Impeachment is thus denied in the context in which it was used. It's denied that Trump incited the crowd and engaged in destructive behavior. It's denied that the phrase, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore, had anything to do with the action at the Capitol, as it was clearly about the need to fight for election security in general, as evidenced by the recording of the speech. And we talked about that here. We went through all of the bad language that was alleged, and he referenced this multiple of times. He talked about fighting the media. He talked about fighting to get Judge Kavanaugh nominated to the Supreme Court. He used the word fight a lot in his speech, I think 23 times. And not once did he say about tearing down a Capitol building. It is denied that President Trump intended to interfere with the counting of the electoral votes. As is customary, members of Congress challenged the electoral vote submissions under a written process for doing so. Respective houses are allowed to debate. Democratic members of Congress challenged electoral votes repeatedly in 2017. 2021, Republican members of Congress challenged electoral votes. The purpose of the joint session was to fulfill their duties. And then number 7, President Trump's conduct on January 6, according to the Democrats, followed his prior efforts to subvert the certification of the results. And they talk about this Raffensperger phone call. Admitted in part, denied in part. Denied is irrelevant to any matter before the Senate. It is admitted that President Trump spoke with Raffensperger and several attorneys, but none of that's relevant, they say. And then lastly, before we get to their defenses briefly, in all of this, Trump endangered the security of the U.S. He betrayed his trust as president to the manifest injury of the people of the U.S. It's denied that Donald Trump ever endangered the security of the United States. Denied and denied. So it's 2 denials. Then we get to the legal defenses. Let's run through these. Legal defenses. You can see here the article. They're saying the article of impeachment lodged against him by the U.S. House of Representatives is facially and substantively flawed, otherwise unconstitutional, must be dismissed without prejudice. Number 1, the Senate of the U.S. lacks jurisdiction. He holds no public office from which he can be removed. The Constitution limits the authority of the Senate in cases of impeachment to removal from office as a prerequisite. Defense number 2, the Senate of the U.S. lacks jurisdiction because he holds no public office, and the article of impeachment is moot as a non-justiciable question. Okay, so the remedy is not even available because he's not there, and the article of impeachment is moot because he's not in office anymore. Should the Senate act on the article of impeachment, it will have passed a bill of attainder in violation of the Constitution. Number 4, the article of impeachment misconstrues protected speech and fails to meet the constitutional standard for any impeachable offense. The House of Representatives deprived the president of due process of law by rushing in to issue an article of impeachment by ignoring its own procedures and precedents going back to the mid-19th century. The lack of due process included, but not limited to, its failure to conduct any meaningful committee review or other investigation or engage in any full and free consideration of the evidence, as well as, and it just goes on and on. No exigent circumstances. They deprive the president of due process. If this body doesn't act in favor, then the president doesn't enjoy the same rights that all other American citizens are guaranteed by the Bill of Rights. He's saying it's free political speech. It's the backbone of America. The House had no reason to rush its proceedings, disregard its precedents and procedures. They failed to grant the accused his opportunity to be heard in person and through counsel. All basic tenets of due process of law, which I concur with. The article of impeachment violates the right to free speech that are guaranteed under the First Amendment. Already talked about that. The article is constitutionally flawed in that it charges multiple instances. So this is an interesting argument that I hadn't seen before, but they're basically saying here that the House it fails because it's interweaving differing allegations rather than breaking them up into counts of alleged individual instances of misconduct. So what they're saying is that basically they're making several different claims in there, and if they're all lumped into one article, You can't differentiate between the claims. You can't say, all right, well, this one, the senators want to be able to vote, and this happens in criminal law all the time. So let's go all the way back to my candy analogy, right? If somebody is being charged for shoplifting for candy, the candy bar was stolen from the grocery store, and there was a Snickers, a Twix, and a Hershey's bar, okay? And we don't know if they took all three of those. So the government has to prove the theft of every one of those different items. And if you're on the jury, you got to hear the evidence about each one of those items. You can't just say, yeah, all of them. That person stole all of them. Because what if they only stole the Snickers bar, but not the Twix? And so what they're saying here is they're consolidating these all into one group, and they're only giving the senators the opportunity to vote on them as a group, which is a procedural problem. A little bit of a different argument there. And then lastly, the Chief Justice is not presiding. He would be constitutionally required to do so if the House was seeking to have the president removed from the office, but they're not because he's not in office. Once the term expired, the House chose to allow jurisdiction to lapse on the article of impeachment, and the constitutional mandate disappeared for the Chief Justice to appear in court. The House actions were designed to ensure that Judge Roberts would not preside over the proceeding. This creates an additional appearance of bias with the proceedings. I think Senator Leahy was queued up to be the judge, who's a Democrat, who's going to be voting in favor of impeachment of Donald Trump. He's going to be the judge. Okay. Little conflict of interest there. And then this is the conclusion. Donald Trump, the 45th president of the U.S., respectfully requests that they dismiss the Article 1 incitement of insurrection as moot. Violation of the Constitution. The Senate lacks jurisdiction because the man is not in office anymore. If they don't dismiss it as moot, they're asking for an acquittal on the merits. Respectfully submitted by Bruce L. Castor, David Scone, counsel to the president. That was a lot of legal documents. All right, let's jump into the super chats. Thanks for bearing with me on it. We got a couple of them coming in. We got Sal Randazzo says, would you watch and comment on the Zoom meeting with the Dean of Law School and law students of Linwood's alma mater that he infiltrated? So, Sal, I would happily watch that. I didn't even hear that happened, but that's so Linwood apparently went to his alma mater, and there was a Linwood is just getting just canceled across the board, and apparently that was taking place at his alma mater. I didn't even know that, honestly. But yeah, Sal, I'd definitely watch that. If you want to send that over on Locals, that'd be awesome. If you posted that over there, I'll definitely watch that. Sharon Quidney says, I think it's a mistake on the Dem side to expand the scope. Seems to me that opens the door for all of the evidence of the F word to come in. Yeah, and Sharon, this is a great point. I would like to see, honestly, I would just for the spectacle of it, it would be kind of interesting to have a full-blown impeachment trial. Let the Democrats get all their arguments out. Let the Republicans, let Trump get all his arguments out. And, let's get to the nuts and bolts of this thing. Currently, what it sounds like is probably going to happen is the senators are going to find some procedural issue to not have to pick a side, really, is what's going to happen, right? The senators now have a pretty good excuse. They can go in and say, look, I don't support Donald Trump at all. I would have voted to convict him, but we don't have any jurisdiction over this thing. So I got to vote to acquit. And it's going to go down in the books as an acquittal vote, and their constituencies aren't going to know any better, and they're going to just escape. They're going to pull a little bit of an escape hatch so that they don't have to make a hard decision. Good to see you, Sharon. We got TZ1052 says, so is it impeachable to be wrong? Biden pushed for an investigation of Trump and unmasked names in Trump's team. Biden echoes calls for the Select Committee on Trump and Russia Politico, 3/23/2017. So, I mean, this is my other problem with these standards. They're so low. I think every single politician who's ever run for office, anybody who said anything positive about the summer unrest, any of the rioters that were taking place, any of the BLM stuff, any of the Antifa stuff, any Democrat congressperson who supported that or refused to disavow it or gave support or, like Kamala Harris did, raised funds to release them from custody while they're burning down court buildings and the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis. The standard is so low. The Democrat, I mean, do they know what they're doing? If this goes through, the precedent for every single politician is set and they can all be impeached. It's ridiculous. It just doesn't make any sense. We have Beth Coddington says, Buenas noches, Roberto and amigos. Happy Taco Tuesday. I figured since I'm accused of being a white supremacist, I might as well act like one. But oh no, my white fragility and guilt is kicking in. Well, Beth, that's also some pretty serious cultural appropriation going on. So you have the trifecta. You've got your white fragility, your white supremacist tendencies, and your just shameless cultural appropriation of Taco Tuesday. Is it? It is Tuesday. Maybe I'll get some tacos tonight. Cheers on the tacos there, Beth. Thank you for that. She says, I'm not promoting violence at all, but I really do think the Dems are going to implode. I plan to have popcorn for it. Yeah, no violence, of course. No violence at all. Nobody wants any of that. And I mean that, because if I say that, even though Donald Trump said peaceful, apparently that doesn't necessarily mean peaceful. It's code word for something else, but I genuinely mean it. So you got to double say everything now just to be crystal clear. I think the Democrats probably, honestly, I think they're recognizing that the country has moved on past this stuff. I'm not sure how much interest the general non-political, apolitical American populace has over this impeachment stuff. I think many people have just moved on by it, quite frankly. And if you see a fast impeachment proceeding, then that means that both sides want to be done and over with this thing. If it's long, then that means the Democrats, I think, have some political mileage to get out of it. And these impeachment trials can take a long time or they can go quickly. So we'll see. But I think that you're probably right, Beth. I'm not sure that this is going to fare well for them. Just as a political matter, I think the public is going to look at this and go, this is still like, you're still grinding on this thing. All right. MJ says, Faith, how can they change the scope after they already voted on the original impeachment in the House? So they can do that because this is a political trial. And there's a new report, I think it was published on January 27th, that Chris Wiseman actually alerted me to. I had no idea this thing even existed. But the Congressional Research Service drafted and put out a summary on how impeachment proceedings work. So if you just Google that or find it over on Locals, Chris Wiseman posted it, you can see that the Senate has whatever rules they want. The House, they can just basically do whatever they want. Every time there's a new impeachment proceeding, they sort of craft their own rules for that particular proceeding in context of the current environment. And so it's a free-for-all, essentially. So they can just talk about whatever they want. There's really not much rhyme or reason to it. If you read that document, it'll make much more sense. We have another one from MJ says, with all this crud, I'm doing breathing 4-7-8 throughout the show. That's good. It'll help you, MJ. I did it before the show myself. 4-7-8 breathing. Remember this. 4 counts in, hold it, 7. Exhale for 8 counts. 4 in, hold 7, exhale 8. Cycle of 4. Do that 4 times. Do that twice a day, morning and night. It will literally change your life. Look how happy I get just thinking about it. It's outstanding. Glad you're doing it. Will help with the anxiety, help you sleep better. You'll feel great. Sharon Quidney also says, if everybody knew or suspected there was going to be trouble, why didn't they prepare for it? Could they have been hoping there would be trouble? Well, that is the implication, isn't it, Sharon? If everybody knew, if this was all so widespread, if everybody knew that Donald Trump was this white supremacist, racist quarter, why didn't they prepare for it? In fact, why was it the opposite? Why were they denying additional help? Ask Mayor Bowser. I don't know. I would love to get to the bottom of this. I'm really, really waiting for some of these, reports that everybody's working on to come out. TZ1052 says, if everyone knew, did they brief the press or the chief of staff? There was more evidence for a Democrat conspiracy with mayor of D.C. and the Capitol Police. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the implication. You can't claim that right now because that's pretty dangerous, but it is the implication. If everybody knew that this was such a problem, where the hell was the security? Beth Coddington says, too bad you couldn't defend him, Robert. Yeah, Beth, I was thinking there, if he wasn't going to find a team, I would have happily defended him. I'll defend basically anybody. So, the president is not immune to that defense. I think everybody deserves a defense in this country, no matter what you did. The defense attorneys out there help keep the scales of justice balanced. If there's no defense, you just have an overarching, maniacal prosecutorial division, and we do not want that in our justice system. Toots Magoots says, you will own nothing and you will be happy. What are your thoughts on the push for a great reset? So Toots, I've gotten this question a couple times, but I haven't really looked into it all that much. I've seen some posts around. I think I clicked over to their website, and I can't tell exactly what it is. I can't tell if this is just a branding play. First of all, that quote's insane to me. You will own nothing and you will be happy. I think that's like the end of mankind. Truly. I think people, what makes people appreciative is when they mix their labor with the world around them and they create something. And the only way that you can actually utilize that or encourage that, facilitate that, is through ownership. Right? John Locke said life, liberty, and property. Life, liberty, and property. Property ownership rights. Our American founders changed that to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But there's some debate over where that came from. But I think John Locke is a good inspiration for many of the founding fathers. Property is so important because it's an investment in something. You created that. You've earned that. That's yours. You take care of it. If you go to different countries where there are no property rights, I went down to Cuba. I spent about 9 days down there. And that's communal property. Guess what? Everything's falling apart because it's nobody's. When it's everybody's, it's nobody's. And then nobody takes care of anything. And the country is in shambles because of it. Go visit it. Beautiful country. It's a shame that they have the system that they do. Amazing people who just want to make something for themselves. So if you own nothing, how full of a life are you living? Sounds like communism to me. I don't know essentially what the Great Reset is. I don't know if it's just like a branding play, where they're just saying, hey, things are going to change. And I would agree with that. Like things are changing pretty dramatically. We have, I've had more Zoom meetings than I know what to do with. And courts are going on Zoom. And now, travels, the whole world's changing, whether we like it or not. So I don't know if this is just a branding play to sort of facilitate that change, or if there's something more sinister and ulterior going on. But I guess time will tell. Wolfgang Deo says, is it time for AOC to resign yet? AOC is not going anywhere there, Wolfgang. I think AOC is going to be a force in politics for the foreseeable future. Just keep that in your back pocket. She's pretty compelling for a lot of people on that side of the aisle. Joe Sosnowski says, America isn't fun anymore. Want to impeach myself. Joe, impeach me while you're at it, my man. Just send one over to me. We'll just impeach each other. That sounds weird. Anyways, we got TZ1052 says, cases are dismissed all the time because of the conduct of the prosecution. Any senator who signs his name to this document should be voted out of office. Yeah, that's a good interpretation. I think all of the senators, all of the Republican senators are very unhappy that this is moving forward, as they should be, because now they got to pick a side, pick a vote. And I kind of want to see who's going to, where the chips are going to fall. I would like to, truthfully, just to see the spectacle, just a full-blown proceeding. Let's see where the lines are. Would be good. Sharon Quidney says, prosecutor, grand jury, jury, and no due process and no possible defense. So it's a kangaroo court, just like during the French Revolution. Yeah, Sharon, that's absolutely right. A lot of courts are kangaroo courts just in general, but this is a political court. This is a political show trial in my mind. And it's, if we can understand that for what it is, I don't think Trump's going to be convicted. So I think we can have some fun with it. Sarah Elizabeth over on Locals says, is it better for Trump's legal team to flip the narrative around and pin the powder keg of unrest on the lack of transparency and unwillingness to investigate election irregularities, or is it better for them to simply denounce the whole thing and claim the entire hearing is unconstitutional? To admit that there was unrest may not be wise, but to ignore why people were there in the first place undervalues all the peaceful protesters that went to show him support. Very good question, Sarah. Thank you for that. So I think it depends on your perspective, and there are really kind of two ways to answer this. If I was, let's say I'm representing Donald Trump, my very strict answer, if I was only focused on winning, winning, not being right, two very different things. You can be right or you can win. People think that they're the same thing, but they're not. Donald Trump, if he wants to be right on this electoral fraud stuff, he can be right all day about it. Doesn't mean he's going to win. So he's got to pick which side he wants. Does he want to win or does he want to be right? In this case, I think if he wants to be right, if he wants to go take this election litigation stuff in front of the country, I think he might actually lose the impeachment proceeding. So it just kind of depends on where he wants to go. And I say that because the country's moved on from it, like it or not. Biden's been in office for what, 2 weeks now? Coming up on 2 weeks. The transition has happened. If Donald Trump wants to go and sort of, reopen that wound, I'm not sure that he's going to be benefited by that from the senators who are the jurors, right? They're the people who got to go deal with the media and their constituencies. And so if he wants to come in and sort of reopen those claims, it may not work out well for him. So in my mind, then, the alternative, the better approach would just to be to say, okay, we're going to leave all that stuff out. Those are political questions. Those can be litigated later, or litigated in the court of public opinion later. I think the litigation is over at this point, but he can bring those up a year from now. He can revisit those if he decides to run again, or he can start a social media company and complain about that stuff, for the end of time. To win in this particular context, I think that the best argument is to leave all that volatile stuff out there and just address the constitutional arguments, which is what I was really hopeful that we would see with some of the election litigation. Every time we saw Sidney Powell talking about Venezuela and Hugo Chavez, I was like cringing. What are you talking about? Nobody cares. What are the constitutional arguments? And I think if Donald Trump does that and specifically focuses on free speech, the legal definition of incitement and insurrection, if he can show that language is just very benign language that every single politician has ever used, and those are some of the better arguments. But and I ultimately think that's where it's going to end up. For him to go in there and say, hey, I had to say that stuff because you idiots were so non-transparent with the election stuff. That just doesn't work out, right? That would be like a domestic violence case where the defendant is saying, well, I punched her in the eye because she deserved it. Look what she made me do, in other words. And that's not a good defense. I'm not saying Donald Trump did that. The analogy's not particularly a good one, but you can see how that might look. And if you are a senator and you're watching that and you're saying, wait, Donald Trump just came in here and he's not even remorseful about any of this stuff. And he's just, he's saying it's all our fault. Okay, well, the media is going to skewer me. My constituency is going to skewer me. And so now I was a no vote, but I have to be a yes vote. So you just have to think about that in those terms. I think that the better argument is, nope, there's no jurisdiction. The issue is moot. Free speech, not incitement. And that's largely what we saw in their response. So the attorneys talk some sense into that side. Liberty or Death says, remember how hard they trained the differences between and or may or shall? I think Ted Lieu was absent the day they taught law in law school. Yeah, we spent a lot of time on that in law school. People think you're out there studying, these weird esoteric Latin phrases and you're, getting really granular with the history of the law. And there is some of that. There's no question about it. But you spend a lot of time, and, may, shall, and how those things interplay with one another. It's called statutory construction. And it can be confusing because you're looking at a wall of text that some legislature somewhere drafted, and they had a million lawyers and lobbyists and everybody craft this document, and they try to think of every different contingency, and they don't. And so now you as lawyers and judges and courts, you have to decipher what they were intending to do and what the document actually says. So, and that's in there. Chris Anchondo says, so if the impeachment goes through, will they have to prove election fraud? Since the Don is still not backing down from landslide comments. So no, I don't think that they have to prove. I don't think that they have to prove that one way or the other. No electoral fraud issues, none of that stuff. I think that they can just keep the focus narrow on the incitement, on the conduct that took place on January 6th. Now, if they want to go down that road, I would be okay with that. If Donald Trump wants to go in there and make those arguments, let's just get it over. Let's get it over. Get it over with. Get in there and duke it out. George B says, Pelosi is too angry and too hateful. She is destroying the country and serving its enemies. Trump is a big talker, but he loves his country. Trump is a big talker. That is true, George. And that's part of the reason he's in the situation that he is. But yeah, Nancy Pelosi, yeah, she is pretty angry, isn't she? Thank you for that, George. Another one from Sharon. Don't know if anybody else has noted this. Your audio keeps cutting out. Bad connection? Doesn't look like an internet glitch. Is my audio bad? Faith, tell me if my audio is bad. All right. Thanks, Sharon, for the heads up. We have another one from Faith. The YouTube overlords mustn't like this. Buffering like crazy multiple times now. How dare anyone read? Oh, So everyone's feed's not so good. All right. Well, let me see what's going on with that. Let me see if I can fix this. All right. I don't know how to do it. All right, so let me fly through the show and I'll figure it out and we'll be back here tomorrow. So Seiji Takahara says, I would argue that America appears to be in a cold civil war. I think the root of the issue is being driven by the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese state versus the Chinese people. Cold civil war. It's not a bad, not a bad concept there. MJ says, I actually agree with Pelosi. There's an enemy within. She only needs to look in the mirror to find the said enemy. Thank you, MJ. We have another one. We got a meme. We have Lorenzo Greasy Bottoms over in the house on local said, at Faith Joy, hypothetically speaking, could I get charged for posting this meme? Washington 2021, Area 51 2019. That's how you do a raid. Yeah. So I think what Lorenzo's talking about is the GameStop stuff. No. That's the Capitol Hill stuff. Yeah. Yep. Lorenzo, highly illegal. Fortunately, your name is Lorenzo Greasy Bottom, so I'm not sure that they're going to be able to find you. You're going to be able to hide in obscurity. We have Frank Carr says, in all honesty, the combination of stacking counts into a single article and having a senator or juror serve as a judge makes this a kangaroo Senate. No? Yeah, absolutely it does. The whole thing has felt like that the entirety of this, of the time that we've been reviewing this. I think it's highly political, and that's just what we do now in this country. We just impeach people for political ends. We have another one from Sasha Shisha says, finally did my existence system. TQ, I need this. Awesome. Good news. That's awesome, Sasha. I think that is outstanding. I hope it's useful for you. I do mine basically every day. I miss a day here or there, but basically every day, and it's been a game changer for me. So I hope it's valuable for you. Thanks for sharing that with us, by the way. Turd Ferguson says, TLDR, too long didn't read. Widespread evidence is required to install, but not to remove POTUS. Got it. Hat tip Chairman, great impeachment. Art, RG, to judge. We're expanding the circle of evidence because of reasons. Thanks, Your Honor. Yeah. The hat tip to the chairman, which is me. I'm the chairman of the impeachment party. The great impeachment article, RG to the judge. We're expanding the circle of evidence because of reasons. Thanks, Your Honor. Yeah, you just whatever you want. Well, our first article wasn't so good. We were not real happy with all of that. And now that we've had some time to think about it, because we just impeached him so quickly, we found all of these other things. And so we're going to go from 4 pages to 80 pages. All right. That sounds good. That sounds reasonable. No problem at all. We got George B says, I'm an American, but I will use the First Amendment. The Dems are rushing to impeachment, so no one can question the results of the election. I will use the Dems are rushing to impeachment, so no one can question the results of the election. I think it's really, I think they do not want him to run again, because I think he is probably still going to be formidable in the future if he wants to be. So while the country is still hot, while our butts are just kind of, I use the analogy of your butts in the fire. And on January 6th and January 13th, when the impeachments went through, that was in the fire. The country was in the fire. People were livid about it. But the more and more you get away from the fire, the less riled up you are. So they want to make sure that they can cram this thing through while the country is still lit. Hilly Dilly says, AOC singing, give them the old razzle dazzle. Thank you, Hilly Dilly. AOC. I didn't watch the whole thing. We have Sach who says, Rob, I really appreciate your legal perspectives, but you need to brush up on your legal terminology. The proper term is inciting erections. Complicated stuff. Yeah, it's complicated stuff there, Sach. And, Chuck Schumer was so excited about that he had his own erection incited, apparently, on the floor of the Senate. That's where that came from. Chuck Schumer has an impeachment erection. Oh, my gosh, that's so inappropriate. We got Beth Coddington says, hubby was really into the Illuminate for a while. Oh, probably the Illuminati. Hubby was really into the Illuminati for a while. They showed clips from the World Economic Forum talking about everything going on now. Yeah, the Illuminati is a fun one. I remember reading about that in some of Dan Brown's books. I think that was Angels. There are movies now, Angels and Demons, The Da Vinci Code. There was another one that was also pretty good. The Illuminati. I don't know anything about the Illuminati. Good to see you, Beth. Paul Roberts says, if the Senate doesn't convict, what grounds does Twitter have to keep him on lockdown? Great show, Robert. Well, thanks, Paul Roberts. And cheers on that last name, my friend. Pretty good one. So what grounds does Twitter have on keeping him locked down? They can just do whatever they want. It's their own company. They have their own ability to do that. So Trump is on lockdown regardless, I think, of what happens on the impeachment. He can be acquitted. He can be convicted. He is on lockdown probably forever because they don't like him. And they don't like the fact that he has a major platform. Jen Psaki was talking about this yesterday on her show, her press briefing in the White House. And she was saying that there was very little thought that they gave to Donald Trump and the administration. They don't think about him all that much. And the reporter says, well, isn't it great that he's not on Twitter? I mean, he could be there like blasting you guys every day, every minute. Isn't it good that he's not? Like, we don't think about him. Yeah, right. You're all extremely happy that he's not on Twitter every day, just giving you the grief that you all want to avoid. We got Procrastination Station says, I want him to test these rhinos to see where their loyalty lies and if they have the gall to vote against their voters and guarantee a challenge to their seat. Yeah, Procrastination Station. That was kind of my take on it, right? Let's see it. Let's see where it is. Don't give any of these political people an out. Don't give them a jurisdictional out. Don't give them a mootness out. Don't give them an out. Say, all right, we're going in there. Make your case. Both sides make it. Let's make this thing last 3 weeks. Ultimate arguments from both sides. Duke it out. Let's see where the American people stand at the end of the day. But that's just me. I like a little bit of sport. I'd like to see a little bit of a tension there in the congressional Senate chambers. But I'm kind of a glutton for punishment in that regard. Thank you for that, Procrastination Station. That was our last one of the day. And I want to thank you all for being here. Before we get out of here, let me say thank you to our supporters over on Locals, locals.com. You can see these awesome people have joined up over there, and they are supporting the show. I am going to update this list tomorrow. So if you don't see your name on there, then that's why. Now, what is on Locals? There's a lot over there. Locals is our different platform, and we have a little bit more, I would say a little bit more freedom over there, a little bit more ability to communicate without the fear of being canceled. And there's some awesome stuff that we have available for you. So as usual, the slides will be over there. You can get a copy of those. Miss Faith posts those right away. The copy of the impeachment template is there as well. So you can download this document and impeach whoever you want, impeach anybody and everybody. Just type in the politician name, their elected position, and what they did, and you too can join in on the fun. There is an existence systems that we just heard from Sasha Sisha said that they had completed this document as well. It's a personal productivity development system that I sort of created. It's available for free. I did a video about this on January 1st of this year for the new year to make 2021 rocking and rolling. If you want to check that out, it's available on Locals. We post some links and stuff. So today I posted the links to the full documents that we covered today. They're available over there. And then, of course, the great people. I mentioned Chris Wiseman and some others. They're over there. I actually learned something from Chris today, and I want to thank Chris for that. So if you want to head on over there, it is it's I think $5 a month to join up. You can contribute more than that. You don't have to contribute anything. If you want to just sort of observe what's happening over there, then you're free to do that. You don't have to pay anything for it. You can see everything. I don't have anything behind a paywall or anything like that. Not yet. I may do that in the future, but we'll see. So for the time being, it's totally free and accessible. We'd love to see you over there. It's watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Locals with an S. One more thank you. I got a very, very nice card. Someone sent one to an office. A woman by the name of Kathy sent this over, and I just wanted to share it. I'm not going to read the inside of it, Kathy. Don't get too concerned. But I wanted to show this picture because I was laughing my little tush off. So this was a self-created card that came over here, and this is what it looks like. It says, the Grim Reaper is looking down on this person. It says, we'll do the thinking for you. And if you look closely, it says, it's Google, Twitter, Facebook, the Anti-Defamation League, and Instagram. And look who's there, begging for mercy, begging for a little bit of relief. I just want to have some free speech, folks. Thank you for that card. Very nice message inside. Very, very nice contribution to the show. Thank you very much, Kathy. Made me smile, put a smile on my face. I ran into Faith's office. I was like, look how awesome this is. And I showed her. So thank you very much for that. Other than that, my friends, I want to remind you once again that I'm a criminal defense lawyer in Scottsdale, Arizona. We help good people who've been charged with crimes. We handle all sorts of cases like DUIs, domestic violence, drug offenses, major felonies, minor felonies, misdemeanor offenses, civil offenses, traffic violence, everything. We handle it all. If you have an open criminal case, if you have an old criminal case you want to get cleared up, if you have an old marijuana violation, Arizona just passed some really great laws that allow us to expunge records completely. So if you have anything like that, if you got a mugshot you want to get removed, if you want to get your rights restored, possess a firearm again, the right to vote, to become a full citizen again under our laws, we can help with all of that. We're very good at what we do. Our mission is to provide safety, clarity, and hope to people in their cases and beyond that in their lives. And so if you know anybody who could use our help, we would be honored and humbled if you trusted us enough to send them our direction, because we're pretty good at what we do. Not to toot my own horn here, but beep, beep, things are, we kind of are passionate about this stuff. So once again, thank you so much for being a part of the program. I know this was a very text-heavy show. It's kind of a lot to listen to me just read through a bunch of documents. I try to do the best I can and make it somewhat interesting and digestible. So I hope you appreciate it. I know that you do. Thank you for all your support. I will see everybody right back here, same time, same place tomorrow. It's going to be at 5 p.m. as usual, Arizona time, which is Mountain Time, 4 p.m. on the West Coast over in California, 6 p.m. Central in Texas, 7 p.m. for the Florida man, and those of you on the West Coast. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Sleep very well. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.